You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello, world, and welcome to Tales from Hollywoodland, a veritable feast of movies, television, Broadway, showbiz stories, and even a little bit of news and gossip with Julian Schlossberg, Arthur E. Friedman, Stephen J. Rubin, and hey, I'm the guy with the deep voice on the show, your producer and announcer, Mike Faber. Today, we're looking at Robert Mitchum, a man's man. And now, here's Steve.
Hi, everybody. What a great subject for today. You know, I was talking to a friend of mine a few years ago about manly men in Hollywood. And he said, name me a manly man, an American manly man under the age of 40. And we had a lot of trouble coming up with the definition of a manly man. If you'd gone back to 1945, the end of World War II, you could probably have named 50 manly men. And I think it was a different era, a different type of actor, a different type of gravitas. And I think Robert Mitchum, of all the actors we could name, really defined manliness in Hollywood. I really believe that. He and Lee Marvin probably were two of the manliest men of all time. Would you agree, Julian?
I would, Steve, and he was a very complicated fellow because, you know, he often played what I guess they would call the anti-hero. You know, we know Bogart was that, but I think Mitchum also was a man that was sometimes not necessarily the hero, not really the villain, but a kind of contradiction in a lot of the roles that he played, but always, I think, interesting, you know. And what a childhood, what a young man he was. He left home at 14 years old. He was kind of like riding the rails as a hobo, and he ended up being a club bouncer. He's a big fellow. He also a dishwasher, a ditch digger. He got arrested for vagrancy in Savannah, Georgia, had to be on a chain gang. I mean, he really paid whatever dues you're supposed to pay in life to become a man. He certainly went wild with it.
But he became a big movie star in the golden age of movie stars. And I think one of the key reasons for that was he had a very distinct look. And he had a kind of a distinct voice and a walk like a different walk, but had a distinct walk like John Wayne. I watched Out of the Past recently, a hell of a movie for film noir for sure. But some of those shots, the camera shots of him walking away in the raincoat and walk with the hat and all that. You know, Frank Gorshin, one of the greatest impressionists in our time, in any time, he used to do a great impression of Robert Mitchum. No voice, just the face. He would turn his face into you think you're looking at Mitchum. So a lot of people probably don't remember Mitchum, younger people. He, like Julian said, he was a man's man. He had a rough life to a point. I saw him in 1980s on television. I just never really watched that series or stuff like that. But he was in something. It was either War and Remembrance or something. What was in the early 80s, Steve?
Well, it started out as The Winds of War. It was based on the Herman Wouk book, epic miniseries at a time when the miniseries was king. And then that was, I believe, that was 1983. And then 5 years later, they did a multi-part sequel called War and Remembrance.
Well, the one in 1983, he was great.
Yes.
And so was the series. I mean, wow. You don't see quality like that now.
Oh, yeah. No, that's Dan Curtis's baby. That was the guy who brought it together. And it's so funny because I remember in those days, before we had, the DVR ability to record things in advance, I remember that War and Remembrance was 10 or 11 or 12 parts. And I remember racing home from work every day to watch it because I couldn't record it prior to being on. And by the way, it didn't do well. The sequel didn't do as well as the original. But his character, Victor Pug Henry, the admiral, started out as a captain. What a great character for him.
What a great cast. How about the
Yes.
cast? They had everybody. I will say this. In those days, I never watched television other than maybe some sports or something. I just didn't have the time. But when I got into that series, I couldn't stop watching it.
Well, it was like a
It's got to be
history.
still around, right? It has to be somewhere out there.
Oh yeah, you can find it. It's like it was a tremendous history lesson for us because it starts way before World War II begins. It starts with the rise of Nazism, and I think it starts with Mitchum's character is assigned to Berlin as a naval attaché, and I thought it was just brilliantly done. It's funny. Mitchum had this kind of sleepy character quality, you know, a kind of his whole look was kind of the way his eyes drooped, and sometimes he looked kind of sleepy. Julian, how would you describe that?
Hooded eyes, Steve. Hooded eyes, I would say, yes. But I want to say that it's interesting. You look at, we talked about earlier all these jobs, and then he starts out in Westerns, and he starts doing Hopalong Cassidy Westerns. He does
That's right.
7 of them.
I remember that.
Yeah, as a villain. I mean, it's really quite something. But he gets a big break when he gets into 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. And it's a big MGM film. It's being directed by Mervyn LeRoy. And you got Spencer Tracy, you got Van Johnson, the biggest movie stars. And he's in that movie. And what happens is he gets, Mervyn LeRoy gets to the RKO people and say, listen, there's this young guy, you ought to sign up. And they sign him for a 7-year contract. But it was interesting that he had, years before that, had turned down Arthur's favorite boss, Harry Cohn. He wanted to have contract, and Mitchum would not sign that. But by, I guess, having a lot of boys, kids, and he decided to take $350 a week for a 7-year contract. And by the way, became at one point the largest, biggest grossing star of RKO in the late 1940s.
And yet his only Academy Award nomination was on a loan out to Fox, I believe. Lester Cowan hired him to play the lead opposite Burgess Meredith's Ernie Pyle in the story of G.I. Joe, which was a big hit. And he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, which certainly put him on the map for everybody.
There was, as I mentioned, I have a page of trivia on Mitchum. Some great stuff. And his eyes are concerned. He says he claims his famous eyes were the result of a combination of injuries from his boxing days and chronic insomnia, which he suffered from throughout his life. While at RKO Pictures, Mitchum became the first movie star to refuse to shave his chest for shirtless roles. In order to avoid that, he allowed himself to develop a pot belly to avoid having to take his shirt off at all. He was one of these guys who was kind of like what was the great nickname of that Jack Warner gave James Cagney? One of the great nicknames of all time. He called him the professional againster. He was always a pain in the neck, you know. But Mitchum was a guy who was going to do what he was going to do, and he didn't want to hear anything else. He's a tough character, good guy.
In the 1950s, I guess one of his most celebrated moments, or I don't even know if you'd say it's celebrated, but he was caught smoking pot. Oh my God, smoking pot. And that became a big controversy. And he went to jail. I think he served a couple months in jail.
That incident was all over the news. You would have thought it was the biggest thing in the world, but it was perfect for the rags. For the newspapers, a lot of them, they carry that mugshot. Julian, do you remember?
I do. And not only that, everyone, at least those of us who were thinking about it, thought, well, that could be the end of his career. It enhanced his career. Yeah. He became bigger because of it. It didn't hurt him. It helped him.
And was smoking pot till the day he died. So it says here.
Yeah, he was a pothead.
Right.
He had an interesting history with Otto Preminger. They made a couple of movies together. The first was Angel Face. And Angel Face, he co-starred with Gene Simmons. And it was an RKO movie. And Hughes was having his trouble because he was always going after his actresses. He's having his trouble with Gene Simmons. So he said to Otto, there's a scene here where Mitchum slaps her. Keep do a lot of takes of it. Keep doing it. And so Otto comes to Angel Face, and Mitchum slaps and slaps, and finally Mitchum says, what is it you want, Otto? And he says, you want it like this? And he slaps Otto across his face. Otto runs to Hughes and says, I want him fired. Hughes says he stays on the movie. So you would think they would never work together. And if, as they say in movies, fade out, and river of no return comes into Otto's life. He gets Robert Mitchum and, of course, the great Marilyn Monroe. And they all hate the movie. They hate it. But Mitchum says it's the picture of no return. He's decided it's going to do no business.
And yet it's one of my favorite Mitchum movies. And it did business. It was a big hit. Interestingly, both Otto and Marilyn didn't want to do the picture, but they were forced to because contractual obligations to Fox. But Preminger was an odd choice to direct a Western. It was not his milieu. And yet, I have to say, I've probably seen this movie about 60 times. It's just one of my favorites. Maybe it's because I identify with little Tommy Reddick, who plays Mitchum's son, who was one of my favorite actors at that time. He came over from Lassie, and it's a physically tough Western. And Mitchum and Monroe are terrific together, just terrific.
Well, they had known each other during World War II. They had both worked at Lockheed Aircraft. And so they had a personal relationship way before they made the movie, which, of course, does help if you like each other. Marilyn called it a grade Z cowboy movie. Mitchum called her the Duchess. He liked her. He called her the Duchess. And Otto, of course, yelled at everybody.
And she does her own singing in the movie because she plays a what do you call it? A barroom songstress. And she's great. And if you haven't seen the movie, those of you who are listening and watching, River of No Return is basically, it takes place in Gold Rush country. And Mitchum plays Matt Calder, who's just got out of prison. His son, played by Tommy Reddick, Mark, doesn't know that he was in prison. His mother hid it. And he finds him in this gold camp. And then Tommy Reddick, who plays Mark Calder, introduces him to the girl who's been helping him out getting situated in this rather tempestuous gold camp. And that, of course, is Marilyn Monroe, who is involved with Rory Calhoun, a gambler. And I won't go further than that, but it's a great setup. And a lot of it takes place on a river, on a raft, hence the title, River of No Return.
Mitchum was a big smoker, a big drinker, a lot of women, and he was, of course, said that he was in that man, a man's man kind of thing. And one day, kind of as soon as when he was really starting to make it, he was getting drunk with John Huston, great director, and he says in his drunken accent, John, I finally become a movie star. I'm a movie star. Look at me. And John Huston says to him, know this, Bob, Rin Tin Tin was a movie star too. So that's kind of a famous thing. Mitchum, he had a photographic memory. He was able to glance at a page and memorize all his lines instantly, and he rarely needed rehearse as a result. He knew what he was doing. His arrest for marijuana possession in the late 1940s was one of the first times a major actor had been jailed for this crime. According to Lee Server's 2001 biography, Robert Mitchum, Baby, I Don't Care, he was still smoking pot in his old age. So there's so much of this stuff here, and I'll be happy to refer to it whenever you guys want to just plug it in.
John Wayne cast him in his production of Blood Alley, which was it's a fun adventure film taking place in the time after the Red Chinese take over China. And I guess he got so drunk on that production in early stages that he was fired, and Wayne took over the role himself.
yeah, that was kind of sad because the man who had directed him in the story of G.I. Joe, William Wellman, was now his director. And but Wellman said that he showed up drunk and he was unreliable. And then there was a story that he took the transportation manager of the movie and threw him into San Francisco Bay. So who knows? What we do know is Wellman fired him, and John Wayne, who was producing for Warner's at that point, came in to take over because I think that was his first movie under his Warner contract as a producer. So it kind of, there was a movie called Desire Me, which obviously left much to be desired, with Robert Mitchum. And it was an MGM film, and it has the distinction of being the first movie in Hollywood that did not have a director credit. The original director was George Cukor. He left. Mervyn LeRoy, he left. They just had nothing but trouble with it, went way over budget, an unhappy cast, and was one of the reasons that led to the demise of Louis B. Mayer. It lost millions, which was unusual then for MGM, and it showed that Mayer was not at the top of his game okaying this movie, and that was a Mitchum movie. Mitchum had a kind of a bad, he was a good luck charm and a bad luck charm. Desire Me, obviously a bad luck, but then we talk about the great movie that everybody talks about, The Night of the Hunter, where he's sensational in it. But and a film was a flop initially, and of course has become a classic now and considered one of his best movies. Charles Lawton directed it, but it was so attacked and did so badly that Charles Lawton never directed another movie again. And if you watch it, it is beautifully directed. It's a real loss. So,
well, it's funny because Mitchum invariably played a good guy, and he's only a bad guy in 2 movies that I can think of, and this was definitely one of them. His Preacher in Night of the Hunter is so evil. I mean, what does he have tattooed on his knuckles? Good and evil.
Evil, yes.
Yeah, and he's in the other movie. The other movie where he's a bad guy is Cape Fear, of course.
Scary movie.
Very scary movie. And his, I mean, it's funny because Mitchum, as I said, always played good guys, but when he wanted to play a bad guy, he could be a real terror. I mean, he's scary. He's scary. I mean, particularly in Cape Fear. I mean, Robert De Niro had a hard act to follow when Scorsese did the remake with De Niro in the Mitchum role. But Mitchum, just ordering salted peanuts was scary.
We had a movie in our catalog at United Artists called Thunder Road that Mitchum did at the cost of about $1.89. That did huge business in places like West Virginia, Kentucky, a certain part, Indiana. It's about moonshine. You guys ever hear of Thunder Road?
Oh, not only that, it was part of his deal with your company, United Artists.
Yes.
He had made a 5-picture deal with United Artists. The first one was a success, something Bob Barcuro, I think was the name of it. But the second one was Thunder Road, which he not only co-wrote, not only produced, most likely directed, did the song. He had a beautiful singing voice, and he co-wrote the song. So,
did you ever see it, Julian?
What's that?
Did you ever see it?
I did, in fact. Yeah, it's not my kind of movie, but it was, as you said, Arthur, the story of moonshiners. Had a big part of the country was quite
if you owned a drive-in movie theater in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, which is up country in New England. A lot of people think of all New England as being Harvard. It's not. It's there's a big area of New England that's gorgeous as it is of a different kind of a, how should I say, political persuasion. But if you owned a drive-in theater particularly, and you were always looking for a second feature, then you get a phone call at United Artists. Could you just book Thunder Road one more time? They would play it dozens of times as a second feature. The audience, they loved it. Big hit.
Yeah, the first movie I said it was called Bandito, about Mexican took place in Mexico. And
Yeah,
Guys, what is his biggest hit movie? Do we know?
Well, that's
Cape
a good
Fear?
question. That's a good question. Let me think of that for a second. I think I might come up with an
He
answer.
was that. Well, what about the thing he did with Deborah Carr?
Heaven knows, Mr. Allison.
Yes, that's kind of interesting.
It did
film.
nicely, but it wasn't a giant hit. No. Let me think for a minute there. There should be
Probably some piece of action.
I can tell you that Angel Face and G.I. Joe were very successful movies.
Even though he's only in the ensemble, The Longest Day, which featured 42 stars, made a ton of money in 1962. That might have been, again, he was in an ensemble. So
Did he do any big business in Western movies, Steve?
El Dorado was a big movie with John Wayne.
And El Dorado was somewhat of a remake of Rio Bravo, with Mitchum playing the part played by Dean Martin in the original. And
Mitchum could have been in Rio Bravo in 1 second, right?
Yeah.
Could have been Wayne as well.
And he could have, it's funny because having such a good singing voice, he could have sung just like Dean Martin sings in Rio Bravo. There you go.
Well, it's Crossfire was a big movie. Crossfire had 3 Roberts under contract: Robert Young, Robert Mitchum, Robert Ryan, and a very, very successful movie for RKO.
Who was the sick guy? Ryan?
Yes.
Ryan was the anti-Semite,
he was the bad boy, but that did a lot of business. He had a lot of films that did well. I mean, he did. That's why he was RKO's biggest star by the end of the 1940s.
Julian, I'm going to point this directly at you because I have never seen this particular movie. I know you have.
I know what you're going to say too.
Well, there's a trivia piece near that says, though respectful of Robert De Niro's talent, Mitchum was amused by the young method actor's habit of remaining in character all day as the film studio chief Monroe starred during the filming of Last Tycoon. Mitchum gave De Niro the nickname Kid Monroe and made many jokes about him with other actors in the set like Ray Milland and Dana Andrews. I trust you saw The Last Tycoon. I never saw it.
I did. Yeah.
Any good?
It was a sad, it was not a good film. No. It was Kazan's next to last movie and had a wonderful cast. I was actually on the set of a ping pong game. I believe it was Jack Nicholson and Robert De Niro where they shot that. And I spent time with a lovely actress named Teresa Russell, who was also in the movie. But he was very good, Mitchum, in Ryan's Daughter, in a David Lean beautiful movie that sadly was not successful, Ryan's Daughter. And once again, not as bad as Charles Lawton, but it took David Lean 14 years after that movie to make another movie. So,
Julian, excuse me, it was successful box office. It just wasn't as big as everybody would have liked. It made money, and he was great in that film. A very underrated film. That's a hell of a good
underrated film. But Arthur, I think it was a big disappointment for David Lean. And
it was, except it showed profit. Believe me.
Yeah. Okay, I believe you.
Yeah.
Well, my favorite Robert Mitchum movie, I saw it on Saturday night at the movies on NBC in '62. I saw a movie called The Enemy Below, and it's based on a book by a British author. It's actually a story. The basic story, as a lot of you know, is a kind of a cat and mouse game between a German U-boat and an American destroyer on the high seas in the South Atlantic. And I thought Mitchum was perfectly cast, and he always looked good in uniform. We knew that going all the way back to 30 Seconds Over Tokyo and the story of G.I. Joe. But here he plays an American destroyer captain, matching wits with Kurt Jurgens, who is making his American film debut as the U-boat commander. And this is a tense movie, and Mitchum's character takes a lot of chances early on. There's an opening sequence where they're trailing this U-boat, and when the U-boat spots them, Mitchum turns the ship around and basically makes it a sitting duck for the Nazis. And everybody's wondering, what is the captain doing? And then the Nazis fire their stern tubes, which are difficult to reload in a submarine like that. And the torpedoes are coming, and all of a sudden he says, okay, turn the ship. So the ship turns just as these torpedoes go flying by and missing him. It's a great moment, and it showed his prowess as a submarine commander. It's quite a great movie. If you haven't seen it, The Enemy Below.
One of the things that's always interesting is when you get to study a movie star's life, the movies they turn down. And according to what I've read, he turned down Patton, he turned down Dirty Harry, he turned down the Defiant Ones. So he turned down, if it's true, an awful lot of successful movies.
Julian, it says here along those lines that he turned down the eventuality that eventually went the role that went to Tony Curtis in The Defiant Ones. Mitchum, a real-life veteran of a Southern chain gang, they put on a chain gang for smoking, did not believe the premise that a black man and a white man would be chained together, and said that such a thing would never happen in the South. Over the years, this reason was corrupted to the point where many people now believe Mitchum turned down the role because he did not want to be chained to a black man, an absolute falsehood. Curtis repeated the inaccurate story in his autobiography, but later recanted after Mitchum's real reason was explained to him. He did turn down movie. It says right here he turned down Patton.
Yeah,
well, that's nothing novel, Arthur. Every actor in Hollywood turned down Patton. It was the height of the Vietnam War, and no actor wanted to be associated what they felt was a glorified war film. But just like you said earlier, that it wasn't the script that Dustin Hoffman wanted. For another thing, a lot of people didn't realize that they were going for a script that was not written by Francis Ford Coppola. Francis Ford Coppola wrote the first draft of Patton, but they shelved it in favor of a more traditional story. And I happened to work for the writer who wrote that script, James Ruffin Webb, and he told me the story that they thought that script was too much of a glorification. So when all the actors turned it down, they went back to the Coppola script, gave it to George C. Scott, and the rest is history.
And it says here that he turned down the lead role of General Patton, allegedly because he believed he would ruin the film due to his indifference. During a Turner Classic Movie interview with Robert Osborne, Mitchum said that he knew the movie would be a great one due to the script, but that the studio would want to concentrate on battles and tanks moving around on the screen rather than on the character of Patton. Mitchum believed that with himself in the role, the movie would turn out mediocre. What was needed was a passionate actor who would fight his corner. To keep the focus on Patton, an actor like George C. Scott, whom Mitchum recommended to the producers.
Well, it's interesting too, because when I was an exhibitor, Warner Brothers had a big do, and they were announcing all their movies. And one of the movies was Dirty Harry, and Frank Sinatra was not only announced, but they even had pictures of him announcing that he was going to play Dirty Harry. So now I know Mitchum turned it down, Sinatra, and of course Clint Eastwood made it.
I think also John Wayne turned it down as well. Although John Wayne ended up playing kind of a Dirty Harry-like character later on. I think it was called McHugh.
Or yes. Brannigan, which one were that?
Yeah. I think both of those, Brannigan and McHugh, were similar tough guy cops.
I'll tell you this, that after all the years of watching movies, there have only been several that when they begin and they come flying off the screen, they're so great that you just come out of your seat. One of them to me was Midnight Cowboy, and the other one was Patton. My God, that opening sequence when he marches up the stairs in front of the flag and starts talking, that's one of the great moments in the history of film.
No bastard ever won a war by dying for his country. He won it by making the other poor dumb bastard die for his country.
Bravo, Steve. You know your stuff, man.
No, it is. I think one of my favorite scenes in Patton was that George C. Scott is with an aide, and they're walking around after a battle, and there's carnage everywhere, bodies and pieces. Oh, it's awful. And George looks up to the sky and says, God help me, I love this.
He was so sick. What a sick fucking guy. That was great. You know, it says here the interesting thing about Thunder Road. He was Mitchum was a huge fan of Elvis Presley's early music and wanted Presley to star with him in Thunder Road. That would have been perfect. I mean, really, when you think about it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Tom Parker's demands for Presley's salary could not be met in this independent production, which Mitchum was financing himself. He had a lot of money on that movie.
It's interesting, too, when we were talking about his hits and, of course, some of his failures. There was a huge success on Broadway with Henry Fonda and Anne Bancroft called Two for the Seesaw. And it was sensational. Tonys were won, and they made the movie. And the movie, they cast, instead of Henry Fonda, Robert Mitchum, and instead of Anne Bancroft, Shirley MacLaine. And it was a flop, just a flop. And one wonders why they didn't let the original cast do it. Now, there may be reasons. Certainly Fonda was a movie star. Anne was not at that point. But it is interesting that Mitchum really, I believe, was terribly miscast in that movie.
Well, one movie where he was perfectly cast, again a military role, was the year after he did The Enemy Below, again for 20th Century Fox, and again directed by Dick Powell, who I'd forgotten to mention had directed The Enemy Below. It's a movie called The Hunters. And this is a movie that is, I would say, pre-Top Gun. It's a Korean War aerial movie. Mitchum plays Flying Ace Cleve Seville, who's a World War II veteran, who comes back to fly F-86 Sabre jets in Korea and becomes an ace. And he co-stars opposite Robert Wagner and Richard Egan and My Brit. And it's a really, really terrific. When it's in the air, it is thrilling to watch, and it is reminiscent of watching the Top Gun movies of recent. It's shot in CinemaScope. It's really one of my favorites, and probably one of the first Mitchum movies I ever saw in the theater.
It says here that while filming El Dorado in 1966, Mitchum was amused by co-star John Wayne's attempts to play his screen persona to the hilt in real life. He recalled that Wayne wore 4-inch lifts to increase his height and had the roof of his car raised so he could drive wearing his Stetson hat. Cool observations.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. Miss Mitchum once said that that Reverend Harry Powell, the murderous villain he played in The Night of the Hunter, was his favorite role. He is considered to be one of the most underrated actors of the Golden Age. I would agree with that.
I would too. He was also really good in Farewell, My Lovely, playing the Philip Marlowe character. And it was a damn good movie. He also did Philip Marlowe in The Big Sleep. And of course, I think of him as those hooded eyes. The Big Sleep could be Robert Mitchum. So,
I'll give you guys a picture that's underrated. A hell of a movie shot in Boston called The Friends of Eddie Coyle.
Yes, very, very good movie. And, you know, he had the ability to inhabit these characters in these crime dramas that really, really worked. That was a good one. And then he did a movie in Japan called The Yakuza about the Japanese mob. And he's
Sidney Pollack directed that.
Sidney Pollack directed, exactly. And it's a really, I caught that more recently. I didn't see it originally. Very well done. But, you know, it's funny. He very, very, very seldom did comedy. And one of my favorite little guilty pleasure movies was in '64, a movie called What a Way to Go. And Shirley MacLaine plays a woman whose life is cursed. And every time she gets married, her husband dies mysteriously. And I know that I remember vividly that Mitchum is cast as Rod Anderson, who today would be a billionaire, but back in the '60s, he was simply a multi-millionaire. Yeah. And he's a lot of fun. It's funny because they parody all of the the trappings of being a rich person, because he's got more money than he knows what to do with, and has a lot of fun with Shirley MacLaine, who's absolutely adorable in it.
One of the great plays to sit through on Broadway was a play called That Championship Season. It was really a sensational night in the theater, very highly emotional. And the great thing that theater can do when it delivers something really strong is to get you changing. Whatever mood you came into, you're coming out a different person because of what you've seen. And it took a long time for someone to try to make it into a movie. And they cast Robert Mitchum as the coach. But this was an example of he was wrong, I believe, for the
I
coach.
agree.
And it was sad.
Who would you prefer?
Well, I didn't think of it. Certainly, again, George C. Scott would have been perfect.
That was written by Jason Miller, who played the priest in The Exorcist.
And also was in the original play on Broadway.
Yes.
And when I worked at Showtime in the 90s, we did a remake. And we cast Paul Sorvino to play the coach.
Well, and he was in the original too.
There you go.
Broadway.
There you go.
I saw the show in Boston, and the coach was Forrest Tucker.
Forrest Tucker.
He was great.
Really?
He was great.
On Broadway, it was Robert Prosky who originated.
Prosky, perfect. Yeah. Whoa.
Yeah. So, but that was and Charles Durning was the first time I ever saw Charles Durning, the first time I ever saw Paul Sorvino, the first time I ever saw Jason Miller on the stage. It was really a great evening in the theater and not on celluloid.
We love Charlie Durning, guys. Charlie Durning, every role he ever did was great.
And do you realize that on D-Day, Charles Durning was a ranger who climbed that cliff at Pointe du Hoc? You don't think of Charles Durning being in great shape because he's always playing a little bit overweight. He was an effing ranger on D-Day.
And remember two things. He was a sensational dancer, unbelievable.
Ballroom dancer, yes.
Dancer. And number two, he went hand-to-hand combat and did kill a man.
And got knifed in the throat. He had. I actually cast him in my first produced movie. He's cast in Bleacher Bums. He plays one of the guys who works inside the Wrigley Field Chicago scoreboard. He and
I
Maury,
gotta see that movie, Steve.
You got to see that movie. He and Maury Chaykin have a lot of fun in there.
It says here that treated for alcoholism at the Betty Ford Center in 1984 was Robert Mitchum. It says here that in 1981, he fired his secretary, Reva Frederick, when he closed his office. Mitchum was subsequently sued as she claimed he owed her a pension backdated to 1961. There was no paperwork to support this claim, and she dropped her suit when evidence was discovered that she had stolen millions of dollars from Mitchum over the years.
Oh, God.
As part of the deal, he agreed not to prosecute. During the course of these events, Miss Frederick suffered a stroke from which she never fully recovered. Quite a life, you know. This guy was always paid top dollar. His agent, he was one of those the so-called Magnificent 10. He was one of them. You know, Jimmy Stewart, Henry Fonda, Clark Gable. He came in late, but he was still considered one of those guys.
Yeah, and again, we said earlier, the anti-hero with Bogart and Cagney and Edward G. Robinson. Those guys could do both. They could play both kinds. And that was a whole different world. We don't have that so much now at all.
Well, excuse me for 1 second, Steve. When Columbo, Peter Falk did Columbo with the raincoat, was that an homage to Out of the Past, or just all of them?
No, it was Peter's raincoat. That's actually Peter's raincoat.
No, I understand that, but did he wear it because of those movies?
I don't believe so. No.
Out of the Past, he never takes the raincoat off.
But I can tell you that having spent a lot of time with Peter, that was his raincoat.
Oh.
That was not done for Columbo, or it was in Columbo, but that was. And Peter also would say, hey, Julian, let me get back to you. I got one more thing.
Uh,
Don't hang up. Don't hang up. One more time. That was also Peter. So art does sometimes get into real life and vice versa.
One of my this is such a tangent, but one of my favorite Peter Falk moments is in "It's a Mad, 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 Mad World," where he's a cabbie on a telephone, and Sid Caesar comes running up and wants to grab the cab, and Peter turns and says, "I'm talking here. Don't you see I'm talking here?" It's just a great Peter Falk moment.
I get a kick out of Ruben. I do.
Oh,
And
now another military role. I hate to keep talking military roles, but it's true that Mitchum did a lot of military roles. He's one of those 42 actors in The Longest Day. He plays Brigadier General Norman Cota, who's assigned to the 29th Division. They land on Omaha Beach, first wave. It is a hellhole. And, that movie has so many stars in it. I mean, Daryl F. Zanuck, who's trying to save Fox from the Cleopatra fiasco, just packed that movie with
He even had Tommy Sands. Oh, boy.
He picked Tommy Sands, Paul Anka, and let's see, and Fabian, all three of them as Rangers because he wanted to reach the youth audience. He was very smart.
Of course. It says here he also had Robert Mitchum also had numerous affairs throughout his marriage. He remained with his wife, Dorothy Mitchum, for nearly 60 years. How about this one? Katharine Hepburn once shouted at him, "You can't act. You can't act, and you know you never would have gotten a single picture if you weren't handsome. I'm sick of working with people who have nothing to offer." Mitchum's only response was to shrug his shoulders. Who cares?
Good. I wanted to mention one title which I caught on TCM recently called The Lusty Men from 1952. He plays an ex-rodeo guy. And talk about being comfortable in those jeans and jeans jacket. He looked so like a rodeo guy. And I think he's opposite Edmund O'Brien. And I forget who the woman is. It might be Gene Simmons, but he's just terrific.
You've mentioned Edmund O'Brien, and I think if I ever seen Edmund O'Brien, anything but terrific. I've ever seen Claude Rains, anything but terrific. Some of these supporting actors that we grew up with never would not deliver a terrific role, even if the movie wasn't good. And that was really something. And Edmund O'Brien, I loved him in the Barefoot Contessa, in the Birdman of Alcatraz, in DOA. He was just a terrific actor.
7 Days in May.
7 Days in May, absolutely, as the drunk senator, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, the thing about Mitchum that we all agree to was that he was, as Arthur said very early in the game, a true movie star in a time when they were more, I would say, more demonstrative actors. He gave laid back a new meaning.
Well, also, Julian, he had a distinct look. That look, he had the same kind of, he had this different kind of walk, the stiffened presence, huge shoulders. He had a different look. He was that, he was a movie star.
The fact that Frank Gorshin could do him without having to say a word says something about the kind of actor which we don't have anymore. How many actors today stand out like the Mitchums, like the Kirk Douglases, like the Clark Gables? It's a whole different world. A lot of the actors today are they're very much alike. Very much alike.
In 1973 autobiography, Anything for a Quiet Life, Jack Hawkins wrote that Mitchum would drink 49 glasses of rum before having dinner when they were filming Rampage 1963. He was a big drinker, oh boy.
Oh, God. I once worked with a director who was known for heavy drinking, and I discovered that his lawyer's name was Jack Daniels.
That's funny. Robert De Niro, his co-star in The Last Tycoon, has named Robert Mitchum as one of his favorite actors. Interesting. I think that
what Mitchum brought to the table as an actor was an understatedness that I think is very, very unique. You never saw Robert Mitchum overacting, right, Julian?
That's right. I know that Stanley Donen made a comedy with Mitchum and Cary Grant called The Grass is Greener. And it's a successful film, by the way. But Stanley said he was not the easiest guy to work with. He just wanted to do what he wanted to do. But Stanley did love Cary Grant, and if you look, he made 4 or 5 movies with Cary Grant, including Charade and that wonderful movie with Indiscreet with Deborah Carr. So he did make some comedies. He did do some comedy.
He would have been a tough guy to avoid the missing in a crowd. At the time, he was famous Robert Mitchum from the late 40s, probably right through the early mid 80s. If he was walked into, you would recognize him. He's very recognizable because of these things that had to do with the way he looked, the way he walked, and guy was a tough guy. Everything I've read about him, he was kind of a complex guy. So many people are, but
well, when you have a guy like that and you find out, and not only can he sing, not only he can write, he loved to write poetry. I mean, it's just not what you expect from Robert Mitchum, these kind of attributes. But there they were.
Charles Lawton called him one of the best actors in the world. And Robert Mitchum died one day before his big sleep 1978 co-star James Stewart.
He recorded an album of calypso songs.
Yeah, that's right.
Robert Mitchum goes calypso. Who knew? Who knew? Going back to Heaven Knows Mr. Allison, if you haven't seen this, by the way, Mike, this is a movie that you might have some fun with. It actually, it's a story of an American Marine who's left on an island alone with a nun played by Deborah Carr. So it's a two-hander mostly. They're on a Japanese-held island, and it's how they survive. And it's directed by John Huston, so it's directed with a lot of heft, and 2 marvelous performances. In fact,
he had a long-standing dislike of fellow tough guy actors Steve McQueen and Charles Bronson. Did not like them.
Really? Well, interesting. I was thinking the other day of actors of the heft of a Robert Mitchum never working with actors of equal heft, because you never saw Robert Mitchum and Clark Gable together, or you never saw Robert Mitchum and Charlton Heston, or very seldom would you see Robert Mitchum against another big manly guy. Occasionally it happened in cinema. I know Heston appeared opposite Gary Cooper in The Wreck of the Merry Deer. That was unusual. And of course, John Wayne and Mitchum worked together on El Dorado. But often you didn't see those kind of guys working together. And
often Mitchum was the star.
Right.
And it wasn't a co-male star. It would be a co-female star.
Right.
But as I mentioned earlier in Crossfire, you have both Robert Ryan and Robert Young and Mitchum, and Cary Grant and Grass is Greener. So there was sometimes. But you're right, Steve. You don't really see him with a lot of those guys, but he was really the star of the movie. Most
it says here that he has appeared in 3 films that have been selected for the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Story of G.I. Joe, Out of the Past, and The Night of the Hunter. 3 films. Wow. Okay.
There you go. There you go.
Well, he was great. Robert Mitchum, big star. Turned down Gene Hackman's role as drug-busting policeman Popeye Doyle in The French Connection. It would have worked. That could have worked.
Absolutely.
But not as good as Gene Hackman. He was.
I don't think Gene Hackman was ever better than he was in that movie.
He was great. He was great. By the way, Mitchum was in the news this past week because his son James Mitchum just passed away in his early 80s.
At 84. Wow.
84. Yeah, he. I remember him in an Otto Preminger movie, In Harm's Way. He played a shipmate of John Wayne and Kirk Douglas.
You like that movie, Steve?
I'm a fan of In Harm's Way. It's not entirely successful, but it is a big canvas World War II epic. And aside from some lousy models of ships at the very end, it's very, very doable. Some good performances.
Patricia Neal,
John Wayne, Tom Tryon. I still don't understand how Tom Tryon worked for Otto again, because Otto was brutal to him on the Cardinal. It was just awful. So I don't know how they got him. And it's interesting. After In Harm's Way, Tom Tryon left the business. He basically gave up acting and became a novelist.
When did he do The Other, Steve? The movie?
I think that may have been one of his last ones. I think you're right. I think that was post In Harm's Way.
Yeah.
But Tom Tryon, one of my favorite actors, he's in a Western called The Glory Guys, which was originally going to be the story of Custer's last stand. But when they found out there was a rival Custer movie, they went back and they changed all the names in the title. So it became a generic Indians versus the cavalry Western.
we had the Glory Guys at United Artists.
And that was probably a hit for you, I would think.
Yeah, well, of course, again, it hit in certain areas of the country.
Right.
In our case, it would have been good up country,
I think you also had Arthur a Mitchum movie called Young Billy Young.
We did. That was not a hit.
I would say not. No.
We had a bunch of those kind of movies. They made a deal with Burt Lancaster's company. They had Scalp
Hunters,
The Lawman,
Scalp Hunters. Yeah.
And also
Midnight Man,
a movie I loved called he was beat up and pushed around by some bad guys, and he went back and he tell him Gonzalez is coming, tell him Valdez is coming.
Sure.
Good movie.
Burt Lancaster's another actor like Mitchum, very, very manly, could be very tough. Mostly played heroes. I don't think you ever saw Burt Lancaster as a bad guy. Maybe in 7 Days in May was probably the only thing I can think of.
I was just going to say, Steve, this is a bad guy.
Yeah, he's a real bad guy in that. He played. Oh, and I shouldn't say that, because he's also a bad guy in Sweet Smell of Success. I mean, he could play bad. But Mitchum and Lancaster never worked together. I mean, that would have been an interesting group. Let's talk about the last movies we saw. We probably should have our little segment where we can talk about. I watched something that I think I needed to take a shower after I saw it. I just got through watching a movie called The Devil's Rejects. And The Devil's Rejects is a Rob Zombie movie about a cult of killers. And what they go through in trying to get these killers. And I don't generally watch movies like this, but I find that sometimes I need to broaden my film education by seeing what has become a popular type of genre film. Mike, do you know The Devil's Rejects?
Of course. Sure do.
Oh, see, you do. There you go.
Yeah.
Steve, you've got to pay attention to the title.
Exactly. See?
What was the last movie that you watched, Julian?
Oh, God, it was so great last night to sit back and watch Carol Reed's masterpiece, The Third Man.
Oh, wow.
It just doesn't get better than that movie. It may be one of the finest movies I've ever seen. It's just magnificent picture. Everything about it. Orson Welles has never been better. Joseph Cotton, Alida Valley, Trevor Howard, and the music of that, The Third Man, and the camera work. By the way, the man who, I don't know his name, I forgot, sadly, but whoever shot that movie in black and white won the Academy Award. I mean, that is some of the greatest shots you'll ever see in post-war Vienna.
And what was the name of the instrument that was played in that movie, Julian?
Is it the zither?
The zither.
Yes.
Zither.
Yes, the zither.
It also features a young Bernard Lee, I think, who's working for Trevor Howard in the movie, and Bernard Lee, of course, became M in the early James Bond movies.
Yeah, but boy, well, if anyone listening hasn't seen The Third Man, first of all, you should be ashamed of yourself. But please go get it, find it, find a great movie, because there aren't that many great movies.
What about you, Arthur? What was the last movie you saw?
Sometimes Barbara and I have a little habit. If there's the perfect kind of dull movie or no-brainer or light kind of thing, we'll watch it before sleep. And sometimes it takes us 3 or 4 nights to go through these things. We just end it and exit it and come back to it. But they can't be great movies. They have to be slow, and something about it has to appeal to us. I watched a movie called Act One, starring George Hamilton in 4 nights. Not a bad movie. 1962 or 3. Wow, Moss Hart. Who knew? I mean,
you want to read? You should read that book, because that book is one of the greatest.
I'll bet. So
ever written about the theater. And look how great Jason Robards was as George S. Kaufman in that movie.
He was great. All those, George Segal. You know, it was one of these little movies, little black and white movies. Probably did $1.90, God knows what. But we happen to like it, and I would recommend it for certain people who, like theater and these good actors. Everybody in that movie was very good. It's slow and all that, but it's nice. George Hamilton was great in this film.
Mike, what was the last thing you saw?
We actually just got back this morning from Las Vegas, and we went to go see The Wizard of Oz at the Sphere.
The Sphere. Tell us about it.
Tell us.
Oh, it was amazing. It was just wonderful, because we've all seen the film a zillion times, but they made it interactive. They've added CGI. In my opinion,
what was the admission price, Mike?
We paid over $100 to go see it, but it was worth each. Yeah.
Oh, that's one of the lower seats. People are paying up to $300 or $400 for seats there.
It's amazing. It's amazing, though, guys. It is truly, truly an experience to see. They've got wind machines, and they blow leaves at you and such when the tornado's coming. And they've added CGI, so wherever you look, it's happening. You see all the scenery. It feels like you're when the color starts, it blows you away with the interactivity with it. It is truly wonderful. The one thing I think that took away from it with me, in all truth, is too much CG. It was too much CGI, and it took away a little bit from the screen and the story. But it was beautiful. It truly was restored.
It's funny because in watching one of the behind the scenes documentaries about it, it seems like they take one of the rooms they're filming in the original, and they can expand that. You're seeing the room from different angles that you never saw before. Exactly.
And you could tell when it's CGI, or they've pulled the characters out and put a CGI background in it to expand it out. It's pretty obvious when they've done that. And
just so you know, guys, remarkably, the expectation is for that movie in that theater, the Sphere Theater in Las Vegas, to ultimately gross over $1 billion in that theater.
They spent $100 million to make this production. Now, one of the things I heard, Mike, was that they actually have cut scenes from the original, and that you did not see the lion's speech where he talks about being king of the forest.
Nope, exactly. There are some really glaring omissions from it.
Why would they cut that scene?
There's different scenes they did for timing and stuff. The movie they've knocked it down. It's only like 70 minutes.
Mike, was it crowded?
Oh, completely. It was packed.
And it's become a huge event. And they're talking about doing it with other movies now.
Yeah.
Well, of
And
course.
it was, we were on the 200 level and it went up 300 and 400 level, even higher. And, they were dropping the apples, like they had like stuffed apples that when the trees were throwing them, that they were throwing, it was dropping onto the audience. Or when the snow fell on the poppy fields, you had snow falling on you. And it was just amazing to see. And
Puppies will make them sleep.
Steve,
exactly.
the real future of exhibition is presentation. It is in things like this. It's going to be a fortune to make these theaters what they are.
Well,
but that's where it's at.
In a lot of bigger cities, they have the 4DX theaters now. And I know Los Angeles has it, and I know they had it in Atlanta, I know they have it in New York. And for each movie, they set the theater up that you're experiencing the seats shake, and you feel heat or you get wet and stuff.
Yes.
It's just amazing what they do.
I just hope they don't do the Shawshank Redemption. Can you imagine the last scene where he's swimming through the sewer? That would not be fun.
Well, that's smell-o-vision at its best, my friend.
As a kid, I saw the House of Wax at the Paramount Theater when it was the biggest thing in the world. My God,
3D.
3D.
In
It was
3D. Scary. Was it great presentation?
Which bottoms out in 1953. I've said it before, when Frank Lovejoy in the movie The Charge at Feather River, which was a Western, by the way, written by James Ruffin Webb, who I worked for, who wrote Patton, where Frank Lovejoy turns to the camera, he's being attacked by a rattlesnake, and he literally spits tobacco juice at the audience.
And of course, the audience deserved it.
I never saw a bad movie with Frank Lovejoy or Edward Binns. How about
Eddie
that?
Binns, one of the 12 Angry Men.
Yes.
Who remembers a show called Meet McGraw? Yeah, Frank Lovejoy is a detective. Meet McGraw. Oh, yeah.
How about Charles McGraw?
Oh, he was very good. Very good.
So we are now turning this wonderful broadcast over to our he-bull, Mr. Mike Faber. Mike, take it away.
Thank you, Steve. As always, you've reached the end of this episode of the Tales from Hollywoodland podcast. Remember, we couldn't do this without you, so we want to hear from you. So please write us anytime at talesfromhollywoodland@gmail.com. Remember, you can find us wherever fine podcasts are found, and now you can even find us up on our YouTube channel. If you made it this far into the episode, why not subscribe and give us a thumbs up? Or if you're listening to us, please give us 5 stars. If you're on social media and that's your thing, please follow us up on Instagram and Facebook. We would really appreciate it. Before we get out of here, let's check with the guys and see what's happening this week on their podcast. Julian, who are you talking to this week?
This week is part 1 of the terrific actor, writer, director, Rob Reiner.
Rob.
Oh, Rob, yes. Tells quite a story about him and Mary Tyler Moore, but I don't want to ruin it. But think about this guy. You think of all the movies we all love at the time we grew up. Here's a guy who directed When Harry Met Sally, A Few Good Men, Princess Bride, American President, the Spinal Tap movies. There's a new one out now, Spinal Tap 2. Quite a career, some great movies, and a joy to talk to. And we have 2 shows with him, so it's part 1 this week.
That is awesome. Steve, what's going on over on Saturday night at the movies?
Nat Segaloff is talking about The Treasure of Sierra Madre. We're doing a full show talking about another John Huston classic with Humphrey Bogart and Walter Huston and Tim Holt and Alfonso Bedoya, the man with the teeth, who, by the way, later in life had him all straightened and it hurt his career.
That is awesome. Arthur, what do we got going on next week on our podcast?
We're doing a show on comebacks in the movie business, the comeback kids. John Travolta made a comeback. Anybody remember? But it was Pulp Fiction.
Right.
Yep.
And there's a lot of those stories. And before we leave, Julian Ryan's daughter cost $13.3 million and grossed $31 million. It came out. It probably very underrated movie for our listeners. You should look at it.
That is awesome. On behalf of Steve, Arthur, and Julian, thanks again for listening. This is your producer and announcer, Mike Faber, and we will see you here next time on Tales from Hollywoodland. Your Hollywood adventure starts right here. That's right, folks. Right here. Right here. That's it. And
That's
we're
all,
done.
folks.
Boom.
That's all, folks.
Hi, I'm Joe Heath,
And I'm Tony Heath,
and we're the hosts of the Watchathon of Rassilon.
a podcast where we used to talk about all of classic Doctor Who.
But we finished all of that.
So now we're talking about New Who.
Well, old New Who.
Right, the Russell T Davies era.
Well, the old Russell T Davies era.
Yeah, the David Tennant stuff.
Well, the old David Tennant stuff.
The Watchathon of Rassilon.
Your podcast for old, new, and old new Doctor Who.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.